Shalom Israel. First and foremost, I do want to give all praises, all honor, and all glory to Yahweh Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakdash, to belong to the apostles, and else great millstone for teaching us his truth. Peace and blessings to the hope of Israel. Yahweh is the name of the only Father in Hebrew, Ba'ashem is the name, and Yahweh Shai is the name of the only begotten Son. Back in the lesson, and as you see within the title, Eve is the beginning of sin. And I came across this video right here, and another Eve, another Israelite woman going in, on these women. Her being, real about, how these, women act. And a lot of these women are, unable to accept, that reality that this is the way they act. That there is, something wrong with it. Because you see this wicked, rebellious spirit you see these women are walking in today. You see how the man is painted and portrayed in today's society as something useless, not needed, not important. That the women are, the pinnacle, at the top. That they're on this pedestal. This is why you see these women getting away with various things, various situations, barely getting a slap on the wrist. If that, But a reality is gonna, settle in. And these women are gonna, soon realize that they're not on top of the food chain, per se. Of the pecking order. Which I just, saw one of the brother's lessons. Didn't get to watch it, but saw the title. Pretty much going to, these, women that act like, men. Are going to be, looking and seeking, for men in these last days. So that hard mentality and strong and independent, spirit that they're walking in is going to be thrown right out the window when things go down, as you always tend to see with a lot of these situations. That they drop that act real quick, and now they want to act all soft and, tender and delicate. Well, as you women love to say, keep that same energy. Because the men in the Lord in these last days are going to have that say, that authority to make that decision whether to, take you in or not. So you women that don't want to get with the program, you can go and kick rocks. Plainly put. And if you get offended or and hurt over that, this ain't for you. And sorry for kind of rambling, but I do want to place a quick video. And you'll further expound these points. But the lesson, Lord, will be edifying.
Guarantee, I promise.
Dive into it.
It is not these niggas in this generation. It's the females. It's the females. I used to think the same thing, but then I had to sit down and think. And it's sad to say it, because I love females to death, but y'all are the problem. Y'all gotta stop making these niggas the problems. Stop.
And that's another problem. The woman's kryptonite is accountability. It actually, literally hurts them to, take accountability. For example, you see with, Superman, if he's surrounded, by kryptonite, it literally hurts him. But that's, this, that's, accountability, in this, instead of, literal, kryptonite. But once that's these women's kryptonite, accountability. They can't accept these things, Somehow they always are, the victim.
Stop it. Stop, please. Guarantee.
But she, laid it out flat. Let's see what these comments are saying. And you have women in the comments already, upset about this. Says CCPYT says, "Oh my gosh, here we go." And then you have, shrimps like this right here. It says, yo, it's Bert. It says, the men of the last generation are responsible for the women's perspectives of men in this current generation. I said what I said. So you have a bunch of, shrimps out here also. People love to also call them, white knights. Always come to the woman's defense, even when they're wrong. And you have people saying it's both. Both are problems. Sure, in some cases, the man, does particular things. But really, it's you women. But you have all these people here trying to, appear to be, so-called, politically correct. They don't want to, say something so-called, outlandish or far out. Because they don't want to be so-called ostracized, looked upon as different or canceled. This is why you have people always, leaning into what's so-called, politically correct. They don't have a mind of their own. A bunch of puppets. As you especially see with a lot of these, streamers. They don't have a mind of their own. They only go with what, the public says pretty much. The public eye. But as I get into these scriptures, this is Ecclesiastes chapter 25 and verse 24. And it says, of the woman came the beginning of sin, and through her we all die. So you women are the start of all these problems. And yet they're always the main ones trying to pick out and point out the problems, especially dealing with the men. When they look at you. Of the woman came the beginning of sin, and through her we all die. This is Proverbs 30 and 20. It says, such is the way of an adulterous woman. She eateth and wipeth her mouth, and saith, I have done no wickedness. And going back to that point I was making, how the woman's kryptonite is accountability. Their weakness. And these women will be caught red-handed. 4K, caught 4K, as people, tend to say nowadays. Caught red-handed. And still, they always, try to play the victim. When the proof is right there. And I always like to use the example of, kids trying to sneak in the pantry, the cabinets, sneaking, snacks. And you'll have the parents who will catch them and say, what are you doing? Kid will turn around, crumbs all over their face, And what did they say? They didn't do anything. I wasn't eating anything. Yet the proof is right there. As such is the way of an adulterous woman, she eateth and wipeth her mouth, and saith, I have done no wickedness. And this is why you have the brothers. It's talking about the apostles, angels down, as various other brothers, given that brotherly, advice to stay away from these demons, man, because really they're not worth dealing with, especially with the type of times we're in, with how close, we are to the end of this place. Women should be, the least, of our priority. We have, a duty, a job to do, which is, to teach this truth, to feed the sheep, to do this work. Now it says, all wickedness is but little to the wickedness of a woman, let the portion of a sinner fall upon her. We're going to talk one more time. And it says, all wickedness is but little to the wickedness of a woman. So it's going to show how terrible, how cruel, just how wicked these women are. It says, all wickedness is but little to the wickedness of a woman. These women are dirty, man. Cruel, terrible. Bunch of, brute beasts. And so let the portion of a sinner fall upon her. And what's the portion of a sinner? Judgment, death. As you get throughout various other scriptures going to, for sin is the transgression of the law. which sin goes into the breaking of the law. Another scripture going to for the wages of sin is what? Death. So a lot of these women are going to get what's come to the man, and it really specifically, speaking of these wicked, women, those that want to continue to, be and act rebellious, act out of line, out of order, continue to rebel against the ways of Yahweh Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai. Now you got another thing coming, because there is a order to these things. There are things that these women are to do. Matter of fact, another scripture going to tell these women not to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. These women are to be pillars of rest. But in reality, they are nothing but a burden. They add more on. They add, more problems. This is second Ezra 15:6 now, further get those other scriptures further. Add to that point. It says, "For wickedness hath exceedingly polluted the whole earth, and the hurtful works are fulfilled." So you see nothing but wickedness, confusion being upheld, and really, that's the standard. As you also see Isaiah 5:20, "Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil." So it's all backwards. I would like to bring up that point how we're in a bizarre world. In the upside down. She's seen, Stranger Things. It's all out of whack. And we're just dealing with the point. Speaking of these women, as you've seen this rebellious, out of order, wicked spirit being pushed within movies, cartoons, TV shows, especially music. As you've seen with Cardi B, Beyonce, I don't cook, I don't clean, spirit. And yet you have footage of Cardi B, cooking up, a storm, cooking up food for, I don't know, who she dating. A lot of those women in the industry ran through, hopping on from rod to rod, new men every other day. But that point being, she was cooking, and yet you have that big ball of confusion being pushed. That I don't need a man's spirit. That man is useless type of spirit. I'm going to show that's also, the work, of this devil. Esau even having a hand in it to cause that disruption, that disorder. That's why he heavily pushes, for the man to be, outcasted, from his own home. With Proverbs 9:13, it says, "A foolish woman is clamorous, she is simple, and knoweth nothing." That's just plainly put. That's also why you have that saying, just sit there, and look pretty. You have these women in these leadership, positions, and you wonder why things, go wrong, go bad. So you have, memes and jokes being made about these, women within the, police force. They're not taken serious. They're quick to, pull the trigger, They're quick to escalate instead of de-escalate. Because you get within the scripture how, they're the weaker vessel. They're more prone to emotion. And yet, you see in today's society, they're put into these leadership positions, which is off, out of order, and it ain't going to work. When people hear us say these things and think that we hate, the woman, which is not the case. But there is an order to these things. There's a balance. Is Ephesians 5:22 through 33, which I'm just going to get, to the points I was want to get. It says, "Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord." So you're to submit unto your husbands. And yet in today's society, that's not the case. The women wear the pants. They're the ones in control. This is why you see within these sitcoms or TV shows, the man is made to be the stupid one. Yet the woman is the logical and, the most smart. So you're just seeing this narrative, this image that's being, portrayed and being pushed. But all that is going to come to a halting stop. And when shit hits the fan, when things go down. And we will see where that, Miss Independent, strong superwoman spirit's at. And when things ain't going your way. But it says, and Woodson, as I made a point earlier, there is a balance. And it says, for the husband is the head of the wife, as Hamashiach is the head of the church, and he is the savior of the body. So it's in order. But also verse 24, and really verse 25 was the other point I was going to get. But it says, therefore, as the church is subject to Hamashiach, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. And it says, husbands, love your wives, even as Hamashiach also loved the church and gave himself for it. So husbands are also to love their wives. So there's a balance. Which each have their own role, their own duty. We're just further establishing that point of there being a natural order to things. 1 Peter 3:7, and it says, likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife as unto the weaker vessel. So once these women are the weaker vessel. And that's not some toxic masculinity or misogynistic thing. That's just the natural order of things. And it's a well-known thing. But you see how that's portrayed. I am misogynistic, toxic masculinity, you hate women, this and that. Well, no. It's stated as unto the weaker vessel. And I mean, the point earlier, how they're more prone to emotion, illogical actions, quick to anger, and which is just, based on actions, you're purely, off of emotion. As well as physically, being, weaker. Mentally. As being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. Now it's 1 Corinthians 11:3. As the book, I would have you know that the head of every man is Hamashiach, which is Yahushua, and the head of the woman is the man, and the head of Hamashiach is the Most High. So further establishing that order. And these women hate order. And that's the spirit you see being pushed into today's society. But 1 Corinthians 14:40 says, let all things be done decently and in order. So that's just plain. And I just, once I came across that video, thought I'd make a lesson, going into it, that'd be something to dive into. I was looking for a lesson to make. Lord's wide tights points to give us my ability to edify, close out, give all praises, all honor, and all glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushua, Ba'ashem, Kakadash, and Shalom.